Okay, so we were learning yesterday in the Likutim that you can make a conditional statement such that the transaction will not be binding unless the condition is met, and that's true even if let's say the seller was unable to fulfill the transaction with, let's say, delivering goods by a certain date. Even if he says it was an onus, even if he says, listen, it's not my fault, there was a snowstorm in Buffalo or whatever it was, I couldn't get them to you. That's not my problem. And I can nullify thank you, the transaction based upon whatever condition is made in the purchase order. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Tanai. Ayin Imrei Yaakov, de Bo'inan Tanai Kaful. So I refer you, he says, to where what we said in the Imrei Yaakov, that whenever you do real estate exchanges or transactions, it has to be a doubled conditional statement. If A, then B. If not A, then not B. That's what you're supposed to do. Mikol makom, mi shemochar beso o sadehu uperesh bishas hamachira shel mochro mipnei sherotza leilech lagur lamakom acher. He says, let's say a person sells his house or another piece of real estate, and he explains that the reason why he's selling that piece of real estate is because he wants to live somewhere else. So a guy has a house in Thornhill, and he says, I'm going to sell you my house because I'm making aliyah. And then, gam imlo asa al zeh tanai mefurash harei kimocher al tanai. Even if he doesn't consummate the sale with the tanai explicitly recorded in the sale, nonetheless, it is as if, since it was said publicly that he's doing it because he wants to make aliyah, it is as if the condition is implicit in the sale. But therefore, if he ends up not being able to make aliyah for whatever reason, medical issues, whatever, so then the seller can give him back his money, and the buyer has to forfeit the house. The dafka shapirish lokain b'shas hamachira, but that's only true if that information is revealed at the time of the sale. And apparently it would have to be said in front of witnesses, and there would have to be some level of seriousness. Because since he's saying, I'm selling you my house that I've lived in for 30 years because I'm making aliyah, it's as if a full and explicit condition was placed in the sale. And furthermore, that's only with this halacha is only true with real estate. That when you say you're selling a piece of real estate and you explain the reason why it is because you're moving away from that real estate, then that's as if you explicitly put it into the sale documents as a full Tanai kafel. It's because we assume that people generally do not leave their residences unless they plan to move away. Masha'en kein b'metaltalin lo mo'il giloy das ad sheyasna leheja. But when it comes to the sale of chattel, right, just because you said something at the time of the sale, but did not record it as a full condition of the sale, so then that is not good enough. So, for example, a guy says, I'm selling you my baseball card collection because, I need to raise capital so that I can afford to make aliyah. And then his aliyah plans fall through. And he says, I don't really need all that. I don't need to be as liquid as I thought I needed to. Or let's say he tells you, I needed to liquidate my baseball card collection. And then all of a sudden he gets an inheritance and he realizes, I don't need to sell my baseball cards. But since he did not explicitly say at the time of the sale that I if I need liquidity because of my move, I'm selling you the cards, and if and this is a condition of the sale. It's only if I need to liquidate, I will sell them to you. So then, since he didn't say it in that way, that this is a condition of the sale, with all chattel items, with all metaltalin, just saying that it's because I need to liquidate, I need to become more liquid, is not enough. Okay? V'hu hadin le'inyan kiniyah hadin kain. And he says the same thing is true as far as transactions. As far as purchases. We've explained it from the vantage point of the seller, what the seller has to say in certain circumstances and what is implicit in other circumstances. So with real estate, just revealing to the buyer that he's selling his house because he's moving is enough to make it a tanai, so that in the event that he ends up not moving, he's allowed to rescind the sale. With purchases, it's the same thing. Looking at it now from the vantage point of the purchaser, im diraso b'Yerushalayim v'kana bayit b'Tzfat. He says, let's say a guy lives in Jerusalem, and then he purchases a residence in the city of Tzfat, just as an illustration. Va'omar shekona zem yishum dedaito lakor diraso m'Yerushalayim v'likboa dirato b'Tzfat. And he says, you know what? I've decided I'm moving. I don't want to live in Yerushalayim anymore. I want to live in Tzfat. So I'm going to go move there. So he says, V'lo istaya milsa la'akor dirato l'sham. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out. In other words, there were other family members, or I had a business venture up in the north in the Galil, and it didn't work out. Or whatever the issue is, he says, Nira dahamecher batel dahavi umdana v'habalei ki'ilu hisna. He says there too, if a purchaser says explicitly at the time that he agrees to purchase a house, they shake hands and they draw up papers, that he's doing it only because he has a new business that he's starting in the Galil, and then the business goes mechula, he can extricate himself from the purchase of the house under certain, I guess is what he's saying, since he made it clear that at the time of the purchase of the house, he is only doing it because he thought he was moving to the Galil, he was moving to Tzfat. Now, obviously, this has limitations. Let's say in the bill of sale of the house, there's an explicit clause that says this is an unconditional sale and cannot be revoked based upon other side deals that the buyer or the seller may be relying on in order for the deal to go through. Usually that's probably what you sign on when you sign on a purchase of a house. Because since the seller, for example, is taking the house off the market in order to sell it to you, and there's considerable expense and considerable effort that goes into working on the sale of a house, you can't later come back to the guy and said, gee, I'm sorry, it turns out that the business that I thought I was going to have in the Galilee didn't work out, and so therefore I need my money back. The seller can say, but you signed on the dotted line that this was an unconditional sale, right? What we're talking about is where it would seem to me that paper has not been drawn up to that effect yet. And all I've done is I've given you a down payment with a letter of intent to purchase your house. But I've told you, I need to sell my house in Yerushalayim and move up to Tzfat because I'm starting a new business in the Galil, and therefore I need to relocate, right? But if it ends up in that situation, you would have to really look at the paper that is being signed at the time of the down payment of the money and see what's really going on. There could be any number of reasons why a person feels he needs to back out of a deal. Let's say he couldn't get a mortgage at the rate that he was hoping for, right? The seller can say to him, look, once you've signed certain irrevocable documents, it's not my problem that you're getting a mortgage at a higher rate than you anticipated. That's not the problem of the seller. It all depends, so you have to take the last halacha that we learned with a grain of salt. It all depends on what was committed to at the time of the purchase. And usually the papers that you sign are much more bulletproof, that don't allow you to wiggle and say, well, I only wanted to buy, or I only wanted to sell because of such, and such. That's not the problem of the other party on the other side of the table. But under certain circumstances where papers have not yet been drawn, and maybe all they've done is they've shaken hands on it, and there's been an exchange of cash for a down payment, maybe at that point, there would be an opportunity for either the buyer or the seller to withdraw themselves from the deal and ask for the money back, because it was done under certain pretenses. It was done under certain conditions that were expressed at the time of the sale, at the time of the purchase. Okay.
That's what the whole point is, that it's not that most cases for a real estate transaction, because it's not explicitly.
Right. I mean, but those conditions are usually recorded in the document, in the sale document. For example, it's got to pass inspection, right? And any other condition that you put in usually has to be done explicitly. So let's say the sale of the property, the condition that I want to put in, let's say, buying your house, Lloyd, has nothing to do with your house or the fact that it's an immaculate condition, right? But has to do with the fact that you're planning to make aliyah. Then your aliyah plans fall through. So he's saying that you can go back on the deal based on the fact that your aliyah plans fell through. So,
you went about my house,
right?
You can sell your house.
That's right. So right. Exactly. That's a great common example. So isn't that usually recorded in the document? That, yeah, I mean, it would be a hard thing it would be a hard case to make that if it wasn't recorded, that I'd be able to go back on the deal because I wasn't able to sell my house. You can, provided that the papers that we sign don't contradict don't contradict the verbal statement, right? So that's what he's saying, and I'm just adding the rejoinder. Just examine the paperwork. Well, it's both for the seller and the buyer's benefit. You can create different scenarios where one party has more of an incentive to back out than another. Okay. We'll just do a couple more lines. We're going to stop at 625 today. The asmachta. So then we talked about this concept of an asmachta. An asmachta is a condition that is put in that implies that the deal is not meant seriously, right? It's an exaggeration, right? Yesh omrim shekanas she'osin v'shiduchim liknos hachozer bo lo havi asmachta. So here, this next halacha talks about a condition that is put into a shidduch document. Now, usually what we call a shidduch document is the Tanoim document, which we don't do anymore today in our religious circles. But in many religious circles, when a couple gets engaged, the two mothers break a plate at the engagement. Have you ever seen that happen? It's pretty scary, because what happens if they back out after that point? There are some poskim who say that in that situation, there needs to be a get. They should go ahead with the marriage and then with the chuppah and then get divorced, because according to some opinions, it's worse to break an engagement with a tanoim than it is to go ahead and get married and get a get. So we'll talk about this in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. It's already 6:25, so let's hold it here, and we'll cover this tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. Have a good Chodesh, everybody.